Joining me now from Houston, Texas is NBC's Ryan Chandler, and NBC's chief data analyst Steve Kornacki is at the big board for us. So first, Ryan, to the Lone Star State, set the table for us here. We mentioned that we're watching these big Senate races. President Trump declined to endorse any of the Republican candidates on Friday. So how are they making their final pitches to voters?
Well, right, Ryan, without the explicit endorsement from the president, or at least the exclusive endorsement, he seemed to heap praise on all three of these men at his event in Corpus Christi, Texas last week. But the pitch from all candidates is still their proximity to the president. They want to impress upon voters that they are a friend of Donald Trump, and they have helped get his agenda across the finish line every chance they can. You cannot watch TV anywhere in Texas right now without being bombarded with ads from all of the candidates. But every time you see an ad from Senator Cornyn, it makes sure to hammer home the point that at least their claim that he has voted with President Donald Trump 99% of the time in Congress, repeating that claim over and over to make sure that while a lot of primary voters here in Texas on the Republican side see Cornyn as more of a moderate, even maybe a little too liberal for their preference, they want to make sure they know that he's been a friend to the president at every turn. Now, Paxton's argument is that Cornyn is a creature of the Senate that's been there for 40 years, and it's time for a more MAGA-minded senator.
So we know President Trump's not going to be weighing in, but we did see a big last-minute endorsement on the Democratic side. Tell us more about that.
Right. Former Vice President Kamala Harris sticking her neck out for Jasmine Crockett with a last-minute endorsement, I believe, on Friday. That's a big deal, the biggest name to wade into the Democratic side of this primary. I sat down with Jasmine Crockett earlier today here in Houston. She's feeling very confident with a lot of momentum with an endorsement like that. I think the concern, though, is that did it come too late? Keep in mind, in Texas, the election isn't on Tuesday. It ends on Tuesday with a long period of early voting. By Friday, a lot of people had already voted, although we are seeing some polling that among those who have not voted, they break for Crockett by a significant margin. Ryan.
And you've talked to some voters. What do they seem to be focused on as they head to the polls?
Well, you know, voters here in Texas, like across the country, are by and large focused on two things. It's the economy and it's immigration. Now, I think you get the sense that these campaigns maybe don't want to end with their closing message being this war in Iran. They want to stay focused on those two bread and butter issues. Of course, here in Texas, that is certainly on the top of our minds. Ryan.
Okay. All right, Steve, let's go to you now and talk us through where the numbers stand at this hour. How likely is it that we see a runoff in the Republican primary?
Yeah, I think that's the expectation that, Wesley Hunt, the third candidate in this race, congressman, from the Houston area, he's going to draw enough support that's going to have this go Cornyn and Paxton into the runoff there. And you're talking about that dynamic of, Cornyn hoping to get an endorsement from Trump being on the sidelines. I think maybe that's kind of what tomorrow is all about. If the conventional wisdom is right, this becomes a runoff between these two. What does Cornyn look like coming out of this? Is he a weak second to Ken Paxton, then trying to make the case somehow that he can overcome that? A 20-plus year incumbent can overcome that in a runoff period? Or does he do a little bit better, perhaps, than expected tomorrow? Could he outfinish Ken Paxton, make tomorrow a show of strength, have some momentum going into that runoff? Maybe that would make him a more viable option to get a Trump endorsement that may end up being the make or break thing in a runoff.
Okay. And then how are things looking on the Democratic side? Could there be a runoff there as well, or no?
Technically, there could. There is a third candidate in that race who's really not polling anything. But if it were super tight between the top two candidates, the third candidate here getting 1 or 2% could kick it over there. But look, there's a lot of suspense here in this Democratic race. There has been polling that's shown Crockett ahead. There's been polling that's shown her ahead comfortably. There's been polling that has shown Talarico ahead here. So no one really knows what to expect here. But a couple dynamics are pretty clear in the polling. One is that Crockett is doing extremely well with the black vote. About 1 out of 5 votes in this primary are going to come from black voters. Her political base is around Dallas. That's where her congressional district is. And there's a lot of black votes in that area in particular. So can she run up the score there? Talarico's political base is right here around Austin. He's in the state legislature. He's doing well, very well, with white voters in polling, particularly white college-educated voters. So, a lot of area around Austin there, you see a lot of those types of voters. I think Houston, the Houston area, is going to be a big sort of swing area in this primary tomorrow. And I think it's Hispanic voters. There's been polling that has shown Talarico way up with Hispanic voters. There has been polling that's shown Crockett ahead with Hispanic voters. That's, I think, the big wild card here. How is the Hispanic vote going to break? Take a look at El Paso, a good chunk of votes out there. Take a look all in South Texas along the border, up into the coastal bend here. I think how the Hispanic vote breaks may end up being what determines this primary tomorrow.
And you can watch Steve on YouTube all night tomorrow night as he breaks down these results. We're looking forward to that. Ryan Chandler, thank you as well. You'll be a part of our coverage tomorrow night.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated.